You're listening to sermons from La Cañada Congregational Church and Pastor Kyle Sears. Join us in person every Sunday at 10 a.m. in La Cañada for worship. You can find more information about our church online at lacañadachurch.org.
So I know how to get back from LAX, but I still like putting Google Maps on, just to kind of have that voice remind me, hey, your exit's coming up, you need to go this way. The last time we came back from LAX, Kat was my co-pilot. She wanted to listen to her music, so she put the maps in, and she drives without the voice interruption, and so I missed my exit. Went well past it before I realized what I've done, driving at midnight, and realized it's a crutch for me. I had to explain to my kids, when I was their age, you printed off MapQuest directions, and you had to keep it in the passenger seat and check your odometer to make sure. I often would have to turn my radio down so I could see the street signs better. Before that, I guess Rand McNally was your only resource, and I guess maybe before that, what was it, star charts and scrawls in the margins that said, "Here there be dragons"? I don't know. As Christians, we are guided by our faith, and while it may often feel like we're driving blind, we do have an opportunity to learn from those who have come before and to rely on their technologies to take us forward into this path of faith. And so today we're going to explore our faithful ancestors and how they encourage us to keep moving forward. This is from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 39 through 12, verse 2. Yet all of these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also. And so you've packed your bags, moved to a new city, and you land the job of your dreams. Oh, what great faith. Or you do the exact same thing, and the job doesn't work out. Why are you so dumb? It really rests on whether or not our circumstances say, well, life is good, our faith must be strong. Life isn't so great, oh, ye of little faith. And a glance at the rest of Hebrews 11 as we move through it might prove that point. We start off by hearing of Noah and Abraham and Moses and other great people of faith who are still remembered today. And sure, they had their bumps along the way, but no one could deny that God was working in their lives, and the abundant blessing of God continues to bless people today through their stories. But very quickly in Hebrews 11, the author runs out of names to list. Toward the end of the list, it appears that these nameless really aren't that successful. Right before we get to the passage I read, it says, others were mocked and flogged and thrown into prison, bound in chains, stoned to death, sawn in two, cut down by swords, destitute, tormented, persecuted. Losers, right? That's what happens when you lose your faith. You get sawn in two and destitute and bound in chains. That's what happens when you are unfaithful to God. But Hebrews tells us that like Moses and Abraham and David, they too were commended for their faith. Sometimes faith will lead us to the promised land, and sometimes it leads us to those margins that say, here there be dragons. Faithfulness and setback don't seem to go hand in hand, and yet we have thousands of years of histories where that's exactly what happens. A person is called to take a step of faith, and that faith leads them to a life that is harder than when they started out. Even this week, a close friend of mine reached out, and they expressed how they fear for their family's safety as brown people in Los Angeles and with the ongoing ICE raids, asking, what am I supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? I don't know if my advice was helpful. I said, well, we can't do everything, and we can't do nothing. And so we do our best, even though we know it won't be enough. That somehow in the middle of trouble, we step out on faith, hope it does some good. This letter to the Hebrews seems to be written to a community of people who were just tired, worn out. It's one of the later letters in our Christian canon, and one that has been written after the Roman persecutions of Christians started ramping up. And so at this time, they've lost good leaders who have been martyred. Many have decided it wasn't worth it to show up for worship and communion and all of that because merely showing up put you on the radar of people who want you dead. And so, I've laid down my life all these years. What do I have to show for it? More trouble. A church that's barely hanging on, people tired and worn out, and a hope for the future that seems to keep on dimming. And so the question that I'm faced whenever I read stories like that, and then we look back to all these saints before us who have experienced such hardship because of their faith, is maybe God wants them in that place. Maybe that's the right place for them to be. Hebrews 11 tells us that none of those listed, even the ones who were great, that we look up to like Abraham and Moses and David, none of them got to see the promise that God made to them completely fulfilled. Abraham never saw his descendants fill the earth like stars in the sky. Joseph never saw the sun set at Shiloh. Moses never put a sandal across the Jordan. But they were faithful until the end. They knew that God's promises would extend beyond them, that they, in this grand marathon of a race, were just one part of many who would come before and after them. Though they never found the victory that was promised to them, they lived as if it was already true. Did you know it took like 200 years to build the Notre Dame Cathedral? And it reminds me of the story of a man who asked one of the masons what they were doing, and the mason said, "I'm building a wall. I've been building this wall my whole life. I'm going to build this wall my whole life. And then I'll die and have nothing to show for it." And the man goes down a little bit further and asks another mason, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm building a cathedral. My portion is this wall. I've been building it my whole life. I will probably never see the cathedral completed, but I know that my work is important nonetheless." That is the kind of faith of our ancestors, who recognize that though they have a small part to play, it doesn't mean that their work is small. The writers of this letter tells us that all of those who have gone before us are invested in the work that we're doing now. That they imagine a stadium filled with people. A stadium that would be known mostly to the readers of this letter in the first place, where Christians are martyred and fed to the lions. And yet imagine a stadium now filled with people not cheering for our death, but instead cheering us on, knowing that we are fulfilling the promises given to them, knowing that we continue in that same line, that even though we might face hardship and pain and suffering and never claim the fullness of the promise given to us, we're a little bit closer every day. We have this great cloud of witnesses calling us to live into the hope and the faith that fueled them in their work. Most of them whose names we have forgotten. Most of us whose names will be forgotten. And yet we are called to live as if the future hope we have is true today. Because if it's true today, then it's worth doing something about it. Each little step forward until that future is fully claimed. And so we're told that the race requires endurance. We only have to carry what is essential. So put aside all the sins that distract us, the burdens that weigh us down, the distractions that make us measure the worth of our life in something very different than what the writer is calling us to embrace. But you see, when we have those burdens that weigh us down, it does not mean that because we become a people of faith that we suddenly have no more burdens. Often steps of faith require the commitment that puts a strain on our budgets and our calendar and our friendships. But Jesus promised that he would take and share this yoke so that our burdens would be made light. And so we learn how to pack light, how to carry what is essential for our journey. I love bringing my cast iron skillet when we go car camping. It's a great way to cook over a fire. Not a great idea for overnight backpacking, where you have to carry that thing up a hill and back. Carb loading for a marathon makes sense. Dairy loading, maybe not. One of my favorite hikes was Cascade Canyon in the Grand Teton National Park. An early start, good shoes, bear spray, plenty of water and peanut M&Ms. It made the hike my favorite. I was exhausted and worn out through it all, mosquitoes and heat and elevation gain, but I packed what I needed to get there and back. The wisdom here is that we are to fix our eyes on Jesus, to look to the one who has blazed the trail ahead of us, who has shown us how to walk this path, what we should bring along with us, how we should posture ourselves as we move closer to this end. And where does this path lead? It says, for the joy set before him, that ultimately we'll forget about all of the mosquitoes and elevation gain. You'll tell stories about, your kids with their sleepless nights and their teething and they're biting their preschool teacher and throwing their mat across the room. Or that's the story I tell. But we look back and we say, it was a joy. Even in all the heartache, it was a joy. Because sometimes the joyous things bring us happiness because they were hard. Jesus was not able to avoid the cross and the shame of it. But for the joy set before him, he endured the shame and the cross itself, the death and the suffering and the ridicule, because the joy was the promise he aimed for. If he could not avoid it, then we certainly aren't going to. But the call is to endure by that grace of Jesus who endured so much for us. When we talk about faithfulness as Christians, it is not our faithfulness that counts. It is not our faith that sustains us. It is only the faithfulness of God to us that saves us. It is only the faithfulness of Jesus to know the cross was in the path and to continue forward that allows us to find the strength to endure, that calls us to see this great cloud of witnesses as cheering us on because they too have known cross and shame, but continued on for the joy set before them. And so all of us who have grown weary can look to Jesus, who knows what it is to be exhausted and emptied and chose that emptiness. To look to the one who was faithful to find freedom even within condemnation and rejection, to find salvation through sacrifice, to find resurrection hope by the way of the cross. My hope is that we would be faithful to the one who remains faithful to us, even when we fail, and that in our failures we would come to see the face of God.